Howdy, and welcome to the F1 Hatchet, and welcome to my Miami Sprint post-race reaction. Well, this was a very chaotic sprint race, both on track and after the race had finished, with all those penalties coming in late, changing up the order after we thought we knew where everybody landed at the end of the sprint race. It was a very entertaining sprint race, at least on track, because of all the chaotic weather that caused some chaos on track on when to pit and when not to pit, and see if we could get up a few places or get around those cars. And we'll see if it actually overshadows the actual GP race for tomorrow, or if that will be as exciting as well. Possibly in the drive, possibly there might be a rain, but I don't think that'll be much rain tomorrow. I think it'll be pretty much a clear race, but we'll have to wait and see because weather is kind of fickle in that regard, and especially in Florida. Like normal, I will go through the back of the field and work my way to the front, telling you what happened to each driver and my thoughts on how they did in that instance as well. Start off the chaotic affair. We have Charles Leclerc, who would have started in 6th but ended up crashing his car going around getting to the grid. So before even the race started, he ended up having a little incident. He would have, as I said, started off in 6th, but he would have finished in 20th due to that. Then we have come to Carlos Sainz, who started in 15th and ended in 19th. He did gain one spot at the very first lap. He did a one-stop race on lap 11, switching from intermediates to a set of mediums. He had a nice battle with Ocon, passing him on lap 5 for 12th position. And again on lap 6 for that same 12th position, and on lap 8 for that same 12th position, and then he finally made it stick on lap 11 and getting into that 12th position. He then hit the wall in turn 13 on lap 15 with his left rear tire, trying to come into that corner, trying to get a little bit more edge on him, trying to come up to the car in front of him to get ready to pass after being on those medium tires. And that hit that, doing enough damage to pop that tire, and he limped back to the pits, but there was too much damage on that wheel to deem it anywhere to but retire that car. So he ended up retiring, on that, roughly that 13th lap. So Alonso started off in 10th and ended up in 18th. He did gain a spot at the very first lap. Then Lawson hit him on the back right, spinning him around in turn 12 on lap 15, causing him to hit the wall and causing a safety car due to trying to retrieve that vehicle off the circuit, which then basically ended the race from that point on because it was all under safety cars from lap 15 through 18. So that kind of shut down all the interesting things that were going on and potentially some good races that we were going to have for that last few laps that we had. Max Verstappen came in on 17th after starting in 4th. He did gain a spot at the first lap. He did a one-stop race, stopping on lap 13, switching from intermediates to a set of softs. He did hit Kimi, leaving the box on his pit stop because he was released early, causing a 10-second penalty for unsafe release, which then pushed him way back into that 17th spot. He did actually pass Isaac Haijar for 6th position on lap 14. So he was still up there, but then with that 10-second penalty, he dropped back quite a ways. Unfortunately, and unfortunately for his team, they're the ones that had the unsafe. They weren't really paying attention, apparently. And when Kimi was coming into the box right in front of him, he was trying to exit, and they kind of collided in that running. Jack Doohan started in 17th and ended in 16th. He had 2 spots that he lost on that first lap, so he didn't have a very good start. He did a one pit stop strategy, stopping on lap 13, switching from those intermediates to a set of mediums. I don't have a whole lot else going on for him this race. I know he had a bad qualifying session because they kind of tried to release him at the same time as his teammate, and that caused him to go wide and having to be pushed back, so he lost a bunch of places where people were going around him while he was trying to get back lined up, and so he missed his time for a good lap on that qualifying session, which pushed him back to start in that 17th position. And then we come to Gabriel Borletto, who started in 18th and ended up in 15th. He has also lost 2 spots the very first lap. He did a one-stop pit stop strategy on lap 13, switching from intermediates to a set of mediums, and it was kind of pretty much quiet since then. Now, he's not doing that great so far in the season, but with this qualifying session for the GP race, he seemed to actually pull that together, so hopefully he can have a really good race for tomorrow and really show what he can do and outdo his teammate as well. So hopefully that'll help him in his confidence and he can get back on track. Then we come to Oliver Behrman, who started in 19th and ended up in 14th. He did gain 2 spots at the very first lap, so he did a really good job there, kind of squeezing in, having to hold his breath between a couple of drivers that he was kind of going between and hopefully not getting hit. So he did a decent job of kind of keeping that space and not really pushing it too hard on that. He did a one-stop pit stop strategy on lap 13, switching from intermediates to a set of intermediates to a set of mediums like most everybody else. He did pass Hulkenberg for 15th on lap 10, passed Gasly for 14th on lap 11, passed Ocon for 13th on lap 12. He was actually able to get all the way up into that 8th position and gain a point, except for they decided that he had an unsafe release as well, so they gave him a 5-second penalty, which pushed him all the way back into that 14th position. So outside the points, unfortunately for him. Otherwise, I think he's doing a really good job, and even though he had a bad qualifying session for the GP race, we'll see how that plays out for tomorrow, see if he can do an alternate strategy or something that will help him move up into the field, and like maybe he can squeeze through some things like he did in the sprint race. So unfortunately for Oliver Behrman in this sprint race and potentially the GP race, as that qualifying session didn't turn out as well as he was hoping. Then we come to Liam Lawson, who started in 14th and ended up in 13th. He did gain a total of 4 spots at the very first lap, so he did a really good start, jumping up there, doing a really good job. He stopped on lap 13 for that one pit stop, switching from intermediates to a set of mediums. And again, he had a 5-second penalty for causing a collision. So by hitting Alonso and making Alonso spin and hit the wall, causing the safety car. So that dropped him back into that 13th position. Unfortunately for him as well, because he would have gotten a couple of points, pushing him up into that driver's standings with actual points. Unfortunately, that kind of came to a naught with that 5-second penalty. And he seems to be doing a little bit of those issues, so I'm not sure if it's the rookiness in him or if he's just trying to be too aggressive in those bottom cars, getting himself into those issues, the situations where there's not a real good escape and causing some mistakes that would get him some penalty points and all those issues that he's been causing. So hopefully he can calm down and get stretched out. I think he'll do fairly well once he gets into that rhythm and kind of like shows what he can do and kind of fits into that. But so far he has been, I think, too much pressure, too much trying to show what he really can do, and he's putting all that on himself. Switching cars, of course, doesn't help either, but with all those little mistakes happening and everything else, that's just compounding the issue, I think, in my regard. And he's starting to show a little bit better, but if he can, pull out all those penalties that he's been having lately, that'll show up a little bit better for him overall. Then we come to Esteban Ocon, who started in 12th and ended up in 12th. He did lose 1 spot on the very first lap. He did a one-stop pit strategy like most everybody else, stopping on lap 13, switching from intermediates to a set of mediums. He had a nice battle with Sainz, throughout this race, passing him for that 12th position on lap 5, passing him again on lap 6 for that 12th position, and on lap 11 for that 12th position as well. But finally having to give it up to Sainz going around that circuit. Other than that, he kind of had a nice boring race, clean race, without too much other instances going on. and that kind of pushed him into that 12th position overall. Hopefully he can do better in the GP race tomorrow, where he can kind of show where he is in that Haas. I know that Haas hasn't been that great in this circuit, so hopefully they can tweak that a little bit so they can get a little bit more out of that Haas. Then we come to the 11th spot for Alexander Albon, starting in 8th and ended up in 11th. He had a one-stop pit strategy, stopping on lap 13 like most people, switching from intermediates to a set of mediums. He did fairly well, getting all the way up fairly close and getting some points, but of course then he had a 5-second penalty for a safety car gap issue where he had safety car lap was too fast, so he didn't maintain the minimum gap time for that lap between him and the cars around him. So he ended up getting a 5-second penalty for that, which then pushed him back into that 11th position outside of the points. I think he's doing really well. I think he's kind of, showing Sainz the way. I think Sainz is finally getting his groove into that team. So we'll have to see how those two teammates can handle, competing against each other and kind of building on each other, getting them more into those points and potentially, putting pressure on those front runners. Getting to the top 10, we have Isaac Haijar, who started in 9th and ended up in 10th. He lost 2 spots at the very first lap, so he's kind of struggled on that first lap in that kind of changing conditions with that wet weather. He did a one-stop pit stop strategy on lap 14, where he switched to a set of mediums from those intermediate tires. Then we come to Nico Hülkenberg, who started off in 11th and ended up in 9th. He did lose 4 spots at the very first lap, so he did a horrible start in those conditions, but was able to claw his way back up to that 9th position just outside the points after all of the other penalties that were going on within the field. He did a one-stop race as well, stopping on lap 13 for intermediate to a set of mediums. He did pass Hadjar for 14th on lap 14. Then we get to Pierre Gasly, who started off in 13th and ended up in 8th. He also lost 2 spots on that first lap, so not the greatest, but not quite as bad as the Hulk. And he had a one-stop pit strategy, stopping on lap 13 from set of intermediates to a set of mediums. He is doing okay, but he's kind of lost that little bit of touch that he had in the last couple of races where he was kind of pushing forward. Hopefully that, Alpine can get their groove back on and put a little bit more pressure on those people around him. I know his teammate out-qualified him for the first time for the GP race, so we'll have to see how that plays out tomorrow. And then we come to Kimi Antonelli, who started off in first with that awesome qualifying run that he did, but ended up in 7th. He did lose 3 spots at the very first lap, which was kind of questionable, and whether he should have stayed with it and lost those spots by going outside the track and then coming back on, trying to get that slot, or if he should have known what was going to happen, know that Oscar had the run on him and just try to fit in right behind him so he'd only lose 1 spot. I know there's some debate on that and whether that happened. I do agree that Oscar actually made the corner before he did, and so it was fair, especially considering the ruling from that previous race with Oscar and Max. So in that regard, I think that was okay. I think it was just Kimi as a rookie trying to learn the best situations to do what in. And so he'll take this and kind of pull it into his tool chest so he knows what he can do and what he can't do for probably the better results. But we'll have to see how that plays out in the future. And because of that, he lost those 3 positions at the start. He did a one-stop pit on lap 14 from an intermediates to a set of mediums. But he was trying to pit on lap 13, as I said a little bit earlier, but he was trying to go into his box and got hit by Max trying to come out of his box, which forced him to basically go another lap around. So he basically had a drive-through on that without getting to actually do his pit. So that lost a bit of time, which hurt him quite a bit, I think, in that running. But before he could get back in on lap 14 to switch to those set of mediums. So we'll have to see if that all plays out tomorrow and how well he can do, because he did fairly well, even with some of those issues, getting back into that 7th position. So I think he did a pretty good run. He has a lot to learn. He's still a rookie, but he's still, doing really good as a rookie, as well as any other driver in the field in that regard. Then we come to Yuki Tsunoda, who started off in 20th after making changes in Parc Ferme. So he was going to really originally start from the pit lane, but due to that delay and some other stuff, he ended up starting at the back of the field. And he ended up in that 6th position, gaining quite a bit of points, considering that he was starting at the very back. He did gain 2 spots at the very first lap, so he did a decent start. He was the first person to pit, switching to mediums on a lap 11, where everybody was kind of judging where he was going to end up. Really pushing that envelope. I think they did a really good job there. If nothing else, just for the information for Max in that run. So I think everybody saw that. And of course, when Lewis jumped on right after that, that really pushed everybody into pitting. He did pass Alonso on lap 14 for a 10th position and made it up to 6th due to the penalties in that regard, pushing everybody behind him. So he did a really good job in that race. It's kind of hard. I would probably say he may be the sprint race driver of the day in that regard, because he started off in the back, kind of out of everything. Took the gamble for those medium tires, and it paid off considerably. He would have gotten into the point, or just outside the points, if it wasn't for those penalties from the other drivers. So it wouldn't have quite looked as good, but he ended up in a really good position overall, I think, and so that helped him out in this regard. If it wasn't going to be Yuki, I'd probably say it was probably Lewis for the sprint driver of the day, as he was really struggling on his set of tires, and then saw that Yuki pitted, and I think they saw some little bit of data there and pulled the trigger early as well, and then he took off running quite considerably. So if it wasn't for Yuki, I'd probably give the driver for the sprint race to Yuki. Then we come to the top 5, where we have Lance Stroll somehow making it up to the 5th position after starting off in 16th. He did a really good start and passed 4 people on that very first lap, so he did a really good start there. He did a 1-stop pit strategy, stopping on lap 11, switching from those intermediates to a set of mediums, and then just basically staying out of trouble the rest of the time, getting himself into a decent point range for Aston Martin, which is kind of interesting and good to see. Hopefully they can continue that down the road, because I know they're struggling, but I don't really see that for happening. I think they need to have quite a bit of updates to that Aston Martin to make it really competitive. And so I'm afraid they're going to end up dropping back into the clutches of the rest of the back of the field. But we'll have to see if they can bring something in the next few races to keep them in their running. Then we come to George Russell, who started off in 5th and ended up in 4th. He had a 1-stop pit strategy, stopping on lap 14, so he went a little bit long, switching to a set of mediums from the intermediate tires. And I think that was due to Antonelli's issues on the pits on lap 13, and then coming in back in 14. So they had to figure out what to do with George on that running. But George still got him up to that 4th position overall, and that was fairly good for him. I know it's not where he wanted to be. I know he was really looking to be, forerunners for this, and so we'll have to see how that plays out in the longer GP race tomorrow, to see if it was really just the race pace that he could come in on, or if it was some of these qualifying lap sessions, and see if any of the pit stop strategies and stuff happen tomorrow that kind of benefits Mercedes more than the other teams. But a decent run for George, even though it's not where he really wanted to be. Then we come to Lewis, who started off in 7th and ended up in 3rd. He had a 1-stop pit strategy, stopping on lap 12, switching to a set of softs from those intermediates. And he passed Borletto for 15th on lap 12, passed Ocon for 8th on lap 13, and then passed Max for 3rd on lap 14, and he had the fastest lap of the sprint race. So once he got onto those soft tires, he just kind of was booking it, and I think they said that he was gaining at least 2 seconds on the rest of the field that were on those intermediates per lap, so that kind of helped him quite a bit on that running, getting back up, because I know when he was on those intermediate tires, he was falling back from the Mercedes quite a bit. I think there was going to be a fairly large gap between him and the front of the field. So that was not looking very good for Ferrari. So we'll have to see how that all plays out. But a really good job from Lewis. And then we come to Oscar, who's kind of a disappointment from himself in the sense of all that has happened. He started off in second and ended up in second. He did gain one spot at the very first lap on that first corner, taking the lead from Kimi Antonelli, getting out in front, leading it, and then having those issues with the changing weather that kind of cost him the race overall. He did a one-stop pit strategy, stopping on lap 13, switching from those intermediates to a set of mediums. So it went a little bit longer than the rest of the field, trying to react to those to maintain that first position. Unfortunately, the safety car came out just about that same time when his teammate came in for a pit and kind of got out in front of him, just ahead of him because of that safety car, and was able to take that first position that went the rest of the sprint race. So that hurt him quite a bit, I think, on his attitude, but overall, I think that was pretty good. Did an excellent job in the race, getting that front position again, pushing, knowing the limits, being very consistent on his runs. He didn't really have to fight his teammate except for once, I think, right before he started to pit, kind of coming in back into the field. But early on, he had a nice gap. So there is that. And I know how that GP race falls out between those two drivers. I know they're very close, very competitive. So we'll have to see how the McLarens battle it out in the full GP race, which of course is the more point race. So hopefully they'll keep it clean, but we'll see how that plays out, and hopefully they'll have a good race and not really cause too much angst between the two drivers. I know there's going to be at some point in this season. And then we come to Lando Norris, who started off in third and ended up in first. He did gain one spot at the very first lap, going up to that second position. And then he had a stopping on lap 15 to switch from the intermediates to a set of mediums. So he went quite a bit longer. Well, in those intermediates dying, he was really hoping for a safety car coming out before he pitted to kind of get that free pit stop. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, but unfortunately it did happen in time for him to get out ahead of his teammate before the safety car came around on that lap, keeping him in that first position after Oscar pitted, giving him that first position. That helped him out significantly since the safety car did not end till the end of the race, and so he was just following the safety car, so there was no actual racing. He got lucky. I think he said he was going to have to go buy a lottery ticket while he's here in Miami. The race itself, of course, was delayed due to conditions, and then it went for 2 laps with the safety car, judging the conditions, judging whether it was going to be a rolling start or a standing start. So it really started on lap 3 instead of lap 1, and Oscar had the lead of like a 2.1 second lead over Lando on lap 5. On lap 10, he had a 2.7 second lead over Lando. And then, of course, then he pitted and had the safety car come out, which due to the Alonso wreck that happened, and that messed all of Oscar's plans up and gave Lando the win, keeping him under that safety car to the end. So it was kind of an interesting, chaotic race. And then, of course, we had all those delayed penalties coming in for Alonso and Behrman, and I forget someone else had a penalty as well. So that kind of hurt the finishing order for the sprint race until much later. I think it was during the qualifying session when they finally came out with the final results for the sprint race. But overall, I thought it was a decent sprint race, just due to the weather conditions and the chaos that happened. I wish there wasn't quite the chaos after the race, but during the race, I thought it was fairly good. Forcing that pit stop kind of put a change on the whole aspect for the sprint, trying to figure out how fast you can go, or if you wanted to wait for that safety car to come out, that people were thinking that it was going to come out and get that free pit stop or whatever. to happen. So that timing for that pit stop after, Yuki came in was kind of crucial for a lot of drivers, and playing that strategy in there, I think, gave it that little bit of extra edge for this sprint race. So I quite enjoyed this sprint race when I normally don't like the sprint races quite as much. Though I do like the not so much practice sessions to kind of throwing some of the drivers and, engineers off on where their setup should be, kind of tweaking that throughout this weekend. So what did this do to the driver standings? Well, we still have Oscar in the lead with 106 behind Lando's 97. George is climbing a little bit with 78 points, and Kimi now with 40, just kind of slightly behind Charles Leclerc. We have the big winner here is Yuki Tsunoda jumping up into the 11th spot, now with 8 points, pushing Pierre Gasly, Nico Hulkenberg, Oliver Behrman, and Isaac Hajjar back a spot. And of course, we had a little mix up here and there. So Liam Lawson didn't get any points, so he still remains pointless. Fernando Alonso, Jack Doohan, and Gabriel Bortoleto. So for the constructor standings, remains the same. We have Kick Sauber still with 6. We have Alpine gaining a point to 7, just behind the Racing Bulls now with 8. We have Aston Martin gaining 4 points, so they have 14 now. Haas staying at 20. Williams staying at 25 after getting that penalties. So both of those teams drop those points. Ferrari moving up to 84 with Hamilton's, third place spot. Red Bull moving up to 92 points. Mercedes moving up to 118. And McLaren still with 203 in the lead. What is coming up next is, of course, the GP race. So we have the GP race tomorrow, May 4th. And we have the race distance of 191.585 miles with 57 laps being run, for each lap being 3.363 miles. It was first introduced in 2022 with Max Verstappen being the lap record holder of 1 minute 29.708 seconds that he was able to achieve in 2023. So we'll see if that gets broken tomorrow. So until then, I will see you on the grid, and farewell.